Okay, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you here. I see Casey's here. Good morning, Casey. Good morning, Thika. Good evening, Thika. I know it's nighttime for you. Good morning, Mashid. Who else is here? What's your what emoji best describes you this morning? I'm gonna go with this one. It's not exciting, but that's how I feel. So, good morning, Jenna. Good morning, Karen. Yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with happy emoji this morning. I'm happy that it's the weekend. Happy that it's Friday. Happy that the weather looks pretty good out there. Good morning, Duong. I'm happy that my cat keeps waking me up at 5 in the morning and trying to get me out of bed. Even though as soon as I get up, she's just gonna go back to sleep. But that's her thing. Hello, Ivan. Um, let's see. What's Karen's emoji? Uh-oh. That looks a little scary, Karen. You're not angry at me, are you? Hope not. How's Jenna? Jenna looks pretty happy there. So does her little cat and her avatar. Oh, sorry about sorry about my cat. Um, yeah, she's. You know how cats are. They just want what they want, and it's okay. She's determined. She's determined to ruin my sleep. Casey is a bit of a slow start. Bit of a slow start this morning, Casey. That's okay. That's okay. Um, well, if you're having a slow start, you'll be happy to know. I think we're basically done this racism thing, and so we're looking at this article that has to do with white supremacy, and normally I spend a little more time on it because as you saw from the article, it's complicated. There's lots of different groups associated with these guys, and they are mostly guys. Um, so a lot of different groups associated, and there is something to understand there because they believe what they believe very strongly, even though there's really no evidence for what they believe. Actually, the evidence demonstrates the opposite, and so there is something to be understood behind why they are saying and doing what they're saying and doing. But I feel like I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. I think it's better for us to spend time looking at the people who are affected by things like racism and sexism and religious oppression, and less time on the oppressors. But there is something to be discussed here. I think there's something to be learned, and maybe I'll try to give you the punchline of it toward the end, just so we kind of understand what sort of white supremacism is about, without getting too deep into it, because I don't think we need to get too deep into it, and I think it's very easy to identify when you see it, and I would rather spend time on types of oppression or manifestations of oppression that are more difficult to see, a little more counterintuitive. This kind of stuff, when you see it, it's very obviously racist and violent and problematic, and so it's easy to identify. Um, so Thika's feeling good vibes this morning. That's good. Hello, Erica. Hello, Jimmy. Um, okay, so let's get into this. Okay, so yesterday I said we had switched gears a little bit. So we had finished off with Indigenous peoples' experience within Canada. Good morning, Manish. We'd finished off with that, and I had kind of abruptly switched gears, and we went into this topic of white supremacy. And what I was trying to explain to you is that um, white people being the dominant group in the US and in Canada and in Europe, that has a historical basis, right? Particularly in North America, where white Europeans came here starting in the 15 and 1600s and kind of slowly took over the place and subjugated other peoples to themselves. And so here in Canada, much of that has to do with Indigenous people, but also with people from China or Japan, black people coming from, mostly fleeing from the US. They, of course, have a history of discrimination against them. Um, but white people kind of assumed power in this part of the world and sort of held on to it and used the social construction of race to maintain that power. So there's a bit of a historical element to the reason why white people are the dominant group in North America. Um, but going forward, um, there's also social messaging that continues to reinforce that. Okay, and so the point I was trying to make yesterday is that up until very recently, anyway, if you looked at most of the media, particularly television and movies, um, music is a bit of a different story, particularly in the U.S. actually, where black artists have made a massive contribution to popular music in the U.S. So that's kind of a slightly different story. But in terms of TVs and movies, we saw that much of many of the stories that were being told through white characters and through white points of view. And so many of these popular shows here that you see mostly are the stories of white people. And there's a few, there are people of other sort of races and ethnicities mixed in here, but primarily white and primarily male, right? And so Friends, of course, is a beloved show, but is a perfect example of a show with really no diversity, right? Everyone's white. Even in the Justice League, everyone's white, unless you're green and from another planet. Um, we talked a little bit about Jesus yesterday and the idea that Jesus is often, or at least to me, he has been portrayed looking like this, but we should remember that historically speaking, Jesus probably wasn't a white man. He was probably someone who might have looked more like this. This is kind of a scientific reconstruction of what someone living in the sort of region of Palestine 2,000 years ago may have looked like. And so this is probably a more accurate representation of what Jesus would have looked like rather than this. But of course, we often see Jesus shown this way as a white man, right? And so that kind of reinforces this myth of white superiority, right? If the the sort of only most powerful God in the universe is of your race, that kind of makes you seem more powerful as a result, right? And so we see lots of art in which biblical figures are portrayed as white. Here we have Adam and Eve, portrayed as white people. And good morning, Baha, that's no problem. So what I was trying to say is that these are kind of implicit or indirect messages. And so there is a message of white superiority in them, but it's kind of hidden, right? And so it's kind of like if you remember back very early in the course when we talked about the chess game or the football game. There are ideas of white superiority that are kind of baked into them, but they're not obvious, right? They're not they're not explicit, they're not direct, okay? And so these messages kind of act on us in a subconscious way, and we kind of absorb them anyway, right? Yeah, and so movies, particularly the most popular ones, seem to have focused primarily on white people and white stories. And so that's a bit of a problem, because much of the way that we kind of transmit social and cultural values, and we think about who we are as a society, a lot of how we do that is through media, right? Through movies and television, we kind of think about who we are, right? We think about who we are as a society by putting stories up on a screen. And so, what does that mean for a society that's diverse when all of those stories on the screen are about white people and told from the white point of view, right? What's the message there? And so that's definitely been the case in North America, but you might even be able to argue that it is the case worldwide, because many of the films that are super popular around the world, almost all of them have been directed by white people, and almost all of them directed by men, right? And so a very small group of people, and a very unrepresentative group of people are kind of controlling storytelling and controlling social messaging, definitely within North America, but even maybe on a global scale. And you have to kind of ask yourself what kind of stories and perspectives are being left out, right? When we're always seeing society and the world, we're always seeing it from the same perspective, right? We're always seeing it through the eyes of a white male rather than the eyes of an Asian female or someone else, right? What kind of perspectives are being left out? What are we not seeing? And who is disadvantaged by us not seeing that? Okay? Those are complicated questions, I know, but I'm just going to leave you with them. Yeah, and so one of the ways that these ideas kind of come together is in movies with a white savior narrative. And so, again, there's a few examples here. There's lots more of them. And white savior movies are movies where, to put it very, very shortly, the white person comes in and saves the day, right? They somehow save a person of color or people of color in a way that those people could not save themselves. And again, there are many, many examples of this type of movie. Some of the most frequent ones are, white person comes in and adopts a child of color. White teacher comes into an inner city, sort of predominantly black classroom and somehow rescues them that way. Indiana Jones lands in India and saves a village of Indian people. A white lawyer defends a black client on trial for murder. So there's lots and lots of these movies, unfortunately. And again, they are problematic because they see people of color through the eyes of the white person, and the white person is the hero in a way that for some reason the people of color can never be in these films. And so they are kind of biased and problematic on their own, even though when you watch them they seem sweet, right? They seem you feel good at the end, but when you think about it, you have to remember sort of who's being made to feel good by this movie. Okay, and that brought us to white supremacists. And so I said we described white people as the dominant group in the US and Canada, and they are the dominant group because they have historical and social and institutional power and privileges that are denied to others. And so white people are very much in the dominant group within North America. But as you read in the article, white supremacists don't seem to agree with this, right? They seem to have different views. And so let's go to the questions here, okay? So the first question I asked you, which I think is very interesting, is what's one of the major causes of domestic terrorism and hate crimes in the US today? And it's probably not what most people think. I don't know if you were surprised by this or not, but many people would give a different answer. So what did you say? One of the major causes for domestic terrorism in the United States. Anyone there? Well, um, not quite. I guess what I'm asking here is, Karen, is who is committing these crimes? Who is committing these acts of terrorism in the U.S.? That might. I'm gonna save that one. I'm gonna save this one until a little bit later. Okay. Okay, Karen. Um, yeah. Who's doing this? Who's responsible for these incidents of terrorism in the U.S.? Who is who's predominantly committing these crimes? Yeah, so Erica says white supremacists, and maybe heavy emphasis heavy emphasis on the white part. Okay, so if you look at incidents of domestic terrorism in the United States, so domestic terrorism, I'm going to define two of those. Domestic, of course, means within the country, so that's the opposite of international. So domestic means within the U.S. Terrorism is where you use violence to inspire terror, of course, but it's usually connected with some sort of political or ideological goal. Okay? And so, according to political scientists, if you just go and kill a bunch of people for no reason, it's not terrorism, it's just mass murder. Terrorism happens when you are trying to accomplish something. So if you are, if you are trying to, liberate your people from the occupation of another country, and you go and kill a bunch of people trying to get this other country out of yours, then that's kind of seen as freedom fighting, but could also be seen by the other side as terrorism, right? Because you're trying to accomplish some sort of political goal. Okay, so yeah, domestic terrorism is in the U.S. is almost exclusively conducted by white people and by white men. And so, is that surprising to you? Is that surprising that when you look at statistics for terrorism, you see a list of white men who have done these things, who have perpetrated these attacks? Does that surprise you? Is it what you thought? Do you think it challenges the stereotypes of Americans in some ways about what they think of? What they think of when they think of a terrorist? Let me ask you this question maybe another way. If you If you told the okay, hang on. Oh yes, okay, no, because I've experienced that. Okay, okay, that's true. If you, let me ask you this: if you went to the average American and you told them, okay, American person, close your eyes and picture in your head a terrorist. What do you think? What picture comes into the mind of most Americans, do you think? What do they, what kind of person do they think of when they think of a terrorist? That's kind of what I'm asking. Um, let's see. Oh, okay. So Karen says, so she's not surprised because of propaganda of the government and others, but okay. The 9/11 attacks in Hollywood movies, yeah, have made people believe that Muslims are terrorists. Yes, 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 yes. So that's probably what many people think of when you say, and I'm going to connect this to the article we read on the female professors of color in the classroom, right? I said that when you think college professor, many people think of an old white guy who's kind of quirky and funny, right? That's a typical professor. Interestingly, when I think, um, yeah, ISIS, right? So when most people in the US, particularly, when you say terrorist, they think of, yeah, they think of someone from the movies, right? They think of someone who looks like Osama bin Laden. They think of maybe a Muslim, some dark-skinned guy running around with a machine gun. That's kind of the stereotype um, that is in the mind of many people, right? And of course, um, 9/11 was a big event for Americans, which maybe we can talk about in a second. Um, but I think, Karen, you're very right that movies have had a lot to do with people's conception of terrorism. And so, again, when people think of terrorists, um, they often think of Muslims. They think of people from the Middle East. Um, they think of, again, someone who looks a little bit like Bin Laden. But the I guess ironic thing is that if you look at the statistics within the US, if you are killed by a terrorist, that terrorist is far more likely to look like me than like Osama bin Laden, right? And so, the attacks on the World Trade Center on 9/11 were kind of shocking to the Americans for a number of reasons. They had a significant foreign terrorist attack in their own country. Um, and I think before that date, I think a lot of Americans thought that like they were the most popular kid in school, and that everybody thought they were cool and everybody wanted to be like them. And I think after 9/11, a lot of Americans came to realize that that actually wasn't the way a lot of the world saw them. A lot of the world didn't think they were particularly cool and didn't want to be like them. And so not only did they have this terrorist attack, um, but their self image was challenged as well because they thought they were very well liked, around the globe, and they found out rather harshly that that wasn't the case. But yeah, this is important. If you look at domestic terrorist attacks within the United States, almost all of them are perpetrated by white guys, right? White guys are responsible for most of the terrorist attacks in the United States. And again, that's important because most people don't think of white people when they think of terrorism, right? They think of brown people. Um, weren't they being too dramatic with the love thing? Um, well, I guess that depends on your perspective. It was it was part of their brand, I think, Karen. They if you know your world history, you'll know that after World War II, the Americans really became an important country for the world, right? They were opposing the Soviet Union during the Cold War, um, and they sort of set themselves up as a model for freedom and democracy and liberty. And so, they stepped into a role of global policeman, but they also stepped into a role as kind of global role model. And in lots of ways during the 20th century, I think they are a role model. In lots of other ways, they're not. But in lots of ways, they are. And so that kind of idea, I think, got absorbed into kind of their national subconscious. And so they did see themselves as, the coolest kid in school, the kid that everybody wanted to be like or be friends with. They did see themselves that way. Whether that was too dramatic or not, well, maybe. But some of it was founded. Some of it was, I think, legitimate because they did position themselves during the 20th century as kind of a role model for the world. And I think in many ways they were a good role model. In many other ways they weren't, but in many ways they were. And so, was it a bit dramatic? Yeah, maybe it was, but I think that their self-esteem was damaged. Their national self-esteem was damaged by that attack, and another of other things were damaged too, of course. But okay, so what kind of views are held by the radical right? What kind of dominant groups are likely to be a part of this group? Which groups are okay? So I got a lot of stuff in there. Okay, so so Casey says white supremacists are the ones who are in the group, okay, and they are against abortion and use violence to stop it, okay. They need to keep the purity of their race to keep power over everyone else, okay. Maybe what I'll do here while we're answering this question is I'm going to jump a slide or two ahead because I want to, where's my slide? There it is. Because we should talk about this. If you already know sort of the difference between left and right, then that's good. If you don't, it might help to know because we're talking about alt-right and radical right, and you might ask yourself what's right and what's left, okay? So just a very quick lesson in this. This is a political spectrum, okay? And so people's political ideas, to some degree, can be thought of on this continuum of left to right, okay? And there's two ways of thinking about this, okay? One, I'll just jump back here. So one is the idea of how much do you want the government to be involved in your life, okay? And you can think about this for yourself. So do you want, imagine the government as your parent, okay? And so if the government is your parent, do you want the kind of parent that's always kind of looking after you and checking to make sure you're okay and making your bed for you and making sure you've done all your homework and, always making sure you've had enough to eat? Do you want that parent, or do you want a parent that kind of leaves you alone a little more, lets you be independent, lets you look after yourself, doesn't fuss over you all the time? Let's just maybe do that as a poll, okay? So if I was giving you that choice, what kind of parent do you want? Do you want a parent that is kind of always looking out for you and fussing over you and making sure you're okay? Or do you want a parent that gives you more independence, lets you take care of yourself a little more? They're there if you need them, but they kind of let you do your own thing. What kind of a Which parent do you want? I'm curious. Okay, so Baha wants something in between. A little bit of fussing, but a little bit of independence. Okay. Karen wants both too. So both? You guys are so safe in your answers. Okay, keep answering. What kind of parent do you want? The one that fusses over you all the time, or the one that gives you independence and stays out of your hair a little bit? In between both? Okay, well, if you're answering that, I'll KC both. You guys are you're so diplomatic. Um, but that's kind of what's happening here on the political spectrum, okay? Um, Karen says, well, you do need some freedoms, but you need someone to pull you back to your senses. Yeah, that's true. And actually, Karen, that's true for countries as well. Okay, so there's a left and a right, but to be honest, most people answer the way that you have answered here. Most people want to be somewhere in the middle. Okay, um, so yeah, you can think about this on the political spectrum in terms of those two parents. And so the government that's more on the left wing is the fussy one. Okay, so they will look after their citizens more. They will offer more social programs, maybe free education, um, pension and retirement plans, lots of kind of regulations to maybe protect the environment. And so the government's very present in people's lives. They're kind of fussing over them a little bit. And some people kind of like that, and so they find themselves out on the left. If you go far enough to the left, if you go to the extreme left, you find yourself in communism, right? Where the state takes care of everyone, right? The state gives everyone a job and makes sure everyone has an apartment and food, and you're totally under the care of the state, right? But if you go out on the right wing, just like the parent who gives you independence and doesn't kind of get into your face too much, right-wing governments are like that. And so people on the right don't want as many government regulations. They think people should take care of themselves. They want the government to kind of stay out of the economy and stay out of the market as much as they can. And so the degree of the degree of government control is part of this spectrum, okay? And so again, if you go all the way out on the right, you get to a fascist state, okay? But fascists are kind of complicated, but we'll deal with those in a second. So that's one kind of axis, is how much government involvement do you want in people's lives? How much support do you want? And so if you want a fussy government that helps you out a lot, then you're kind of out on, you lean to the left. And left-wing governments also have usually higher taxes come along with that, because all those social programs cost money. If you're more on the right side of things, then you want less government involvement. You want them to just sort of stay out of everyone's business. And of course, taxes tend to be lower because there's fewer social programs, okay? Like I said, most people are roughly in the center. If you look at the United States, the Democrats are a little bit on the left. The Republicans are a bit on the right, although they seem to be sliding further to the right with every year, which is a little frightening. But most people, like you mentioned, most people are found in the center, okay? Most people want a bit of a mix of some support, some social programs, reasonable taxes, but they don't want to be fussed over all the time, and they don't want the government to just stay out of their lives either. They want some sort of compromise. The other part of this is government involvement in people's social lives. So how much does the government care about who its people are, okay? And so people out on the left wing tend to be much less concerned with people's social lives and who people are, okay? So people on the left tend to support immigration. They tend to support multiculturalism. They're okay with gay marriage and homosexuality. Um, Sometimes they're more accepting of abortion, but that depends. Um, and so, uh, again, if you think of a left wing country, it's a country of people where, we have a bunch of different people of different religions and ethnicities and races and sexualities, and none of that really matters. We're all in a country working together. If you go all the way to the right, you'll find that there's more interest in people's social lives and who people are. Okay, so people on the right tend to be more traditional, more conservative. They want to maintain society as it is. Sometimes they want to maintain their own culture, the dominant culture. Um, People on the right tend to be more religious. And again, they tend to be less accepting of the stuff that you find on the left. And so they're less comfortable with multiculturalism, they're less comfortable with immigration, gay marriage, abortion, things like that. And so um, sometimes you find that out on the right, and the further you go, kind of the worse that gets. And so if you get all the way to fascism, if you know anything about Nazi Germany, of course, Hitler was way out on the right, and he wanted to basically purify the German race and remove everyone else from the country, right? So that's a very extreme concern with people's social lives. So you can describe people's kind of political views based on this spectrum, and it has to do with two things. It has to do with the role of government, and it has to do with how concerned you are with the sort of social makeup of your country. And like I said, people on the left wing aren't really that interested. They're accepting of most things. People on the right are a little more traditional and they fear change to their social fabric. Okay. Like I said, most people are pretty much in the center. Okay. Some people lean left, some people lean right. I think that Canada leans left a little bit. Generally, I think we're pretty socially accepting of people on average. We actually have some socialist ideas. You'll see socialism there. Our healthcare system is kind of a socialist policy, right? We all pay into it, and then we all sort of get the healthcare that we need when we need it. That's a socialist idea. The U.S., on the other hand, I think leans a little further to the right. They're more central, or they lean a bit to the right, and so there's certainly left-wing people in the U.S., but I think they're more conservative, they're more religious, they are less comfortable with government intervention in their lives. They prefer lower taxes, they prefer freedom and things like that. And so I think that's one of the differences between our two countries, is that Canada is a bit of a left-leaning country on average. The US is a bit more of a right-leaning country on average. So people out on the radical right, the question that I asked you here, they're further out here on this right part of the spectrum. Okay, so they're past the Republicans, I think, although the Republicans again are moving right in a frightening way. And so part of these radical right people are white supremacists, right? Because they're very interested in the social makeup of their country, right? They're interested in preserving the race of white people, and they are against abortion, which again, abortion can be, generally I think the left wing is okay with it. Generally the right wing is less okay with it, but abortion's a complicated issue. There's a gender element to it. There's a religious element to it, and so that can go either way. So Can I ask you this question again? Do you have, I know we have, so Casey said that white supremacists are the ones who are in the in group and they oppose abortion and they're comfortable using violence. But can I ask this question to the rest of you? What kind of views are being held by this radical right? So they're anti-abortion. They're predominantly white people, right? That's the dominant group, and so they're anti-abortion. They're pro the white race, right? They want to support that. Whoops. Oh, okay, that's right. That was from before. Okay. So it's pretty quiet out there. So can I ask you what's going on? Is this article confusing? Are you asleep? Did you just not do it for some reason? What's going on? Because it's really quiet and I don't know what's up. Yeah, so the people on the radical right are usually anti-immigration, right? Because immigrants that come to the U.S. tend to be from non-white countries, and so that sort of disrupts their idea of a white society. Anti-non-Christian, yeah. So they people on the far right tend to be, if they're not Christian, so if they're not sort of religious, they come from a Christian background, and so they're definitely in opposition to non-Christian religions, right? Particularly Islam, but other ones as well. Yeah, so Casey said they're anti-Semitic, right? So there's a prejudice against Jewish people that's pretty strong. They're anti-immigrant, good. Yeah, anti-LGBTQ, right? So they are strongly heterosexual and they reject any other sexualities. Yeah, they're anti-black for sure. Anti-other races, yeah. So the sort of radical right is, what makes it complicated is there's just a mix of people that are against a bunch of things, right? And some of those things have to do with race, some of them have to do with ethnicity, some of them have to do with religion, some of them have to do with sexuality, right? So people out on the right are not just don't just hold negative views about certain races, but other minoritized groups as well. And so that's part of what makes them difficult to deal with, because they are kind of a complex group. So what are they fighting for? What do white supremacists think they are fighting for? What do they think they're fighting for? So Casey says what they want to secure the existence of their color and the future of their children. Yeah. So these people often think that they are under threat, that white people are going to go extinct. They're actually concerned about, or feel that they are being subjected to a genocide, right? Yeah, they don't want diversity. They're fighting for power and freedom and preserving their culture. Yes, yeah. As I say, they feel that they are under threat. Of course, if you look at the data, there's no evidence of that. The U.S. is still predominantly white. I think about 70% white. There's no evidence that they are under attack in any way, but they believe that, right? Okay, I'm skipping through this really quick, but this is maybe the last question I will ask you here. So what distinguishes these three groups from each other? And so let's just start with white supremacism. So what makes white supremacists different from white nationalists and people in the alt-right? Okay, so just the white supremacists, what makes them different? What makes them different? What thing do they believe that kind of separates them from those other two groups? What thing do white supremacists believe that separates them from other groups? Yeah, yeah, they're better than them, but okay. So seems pretty quiet. Either we're struggling with this article or we just are kind of tired and out of gas. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to say two things. First thing is I'm going to end class a little bit early today because again it's a Friday and it feels like there's not a lot of momentum here. So I'm going to end it a little bit early. The second thing I'll tell you is that I would like to have a quiz. I would like to have our third quiz on Monday. Okay. So what I'll do is I will post that in Microsoft Teams, and I'd like it to be just on the racism stuff. Okay. So we'll just starting on class 17. Let me just check when class 17 is. Okay. Oh yeah, good. Yeah, so it'll just be on racism. We'll do the quiz on Monday, and yeah, and we'll do that. Okay, hang on. We're getting some answers here. Okay, so white supremacists think that white people are the most powerful, while nationalists say immigrants are inferior. Yes and no. Okay, yes and no. So white supremacists feel that that white people are in fact better, right? That they are genetically better, and that they want white supremacists generally want a society where white people have all the power and there are no other ethnicities in it. So there's an element of kind of genetic and cultural superiority in the white supremacists. The white nationalists, they're just kind of more interested in preserving power, and so they just want to make sure that white people have political and economic power. Okay, so they're not too into creating a white country. They're not interested in sort of getting rid of all other races and ethnicities. They just want white people to have control of the nation. Okay, and I think you could probably fit some of the major political leaders in the United States into this white nationalist category. Okay, the alt-right, here I'll go to this now. The alt-right is kind of a random collection of extreme conservatives, okay? So there's all kinds of people mixed into the alt-right. And they are against a bunch of things, but kind of randomly. And so some of these alt-right people are anti-feminist, some of them are anti-multiculturalism, some of them are anti-immigration, some of them are reacting against the mainstream media, fake news, right? Some people have a collection of views that they sort of that they push. There are misogynists mixed in there. There's people that have a very strong dislike or distrust or hatred of women. Again, there are white supremacists mixed in there. There's anti-Semites mixed in there. There's these sort of anti-democracy anarchists mixed in there. There's some internet trolls who just like to, upset people by making certain comments. So white supremacists are really interested in sort of the purity and the supremacy of the white race. White nationalists are really white people who are just trying to maintain economic and political control. And the alt-right is just a collection of random people who are against all of the things that we talked about. So anti-feminist, anti-immigration, anti-multiculturalism, anti-democracy, anti-media, misogynists, sort of neo-fascist people. All of those people are mixed into the alt-right, and they're just a collection of kind of angry people sort of pushing back against various things. Which one is better? Well, I don't know. I don't think there's an answer to that question, Benamir. None of them are very good. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave it for today, because again, there doesn't seem to be we don't seem to have a lot of energy today. Quiz on Monday. I'll post it in Microsoft Teams. It'll be just on the racism stuff. So class, let's say, I'll put it in Microsoft Teams. Let's say class 17 to 24. Class 17 to 24. Same thing as normal. We'll do the team meeting, and you guys will jump in and out. I'll post the list so that you'll know roughly when you're going to be tested, and so you'll know if you're first in the list or you'll know if you come later. Yeah, I think that's what we should do Monday. Then we can have a hard end to the racism thing, and then on Tuesday we can start with sexism. Yeah, okay. So before we break here, do you have any questions for me? Or do you have things that you would like to say, things that you're confused about? Yeah, questions, concerns, comments? Okay, so Casey seems okay. Okay, so let's see. So Casey's okay. Jenna's okay. Sam's good. Why aren't the white supremacists the same as nationalists? I think it has to do, Karen, I'd have to go back and make sure what the article says, but I think it has to do more with white supremacists are really invested in the idea that they are genetically superior to other races. White nationalists are they're not so interested in the genetic purity and supremacism. They just want to maintain control, and so they know white nationalists kind of know they're in charge, um, and they want to stay that way. And they might have some subconscious views about superiority, but they don't really express them. I think Donald Trump is a white nationalist. I think that he has some racist views, which sometimes he expresses and sometimes he doesn't. But he's very much, I think, in favor of making sure that he and people like himself stay in power in the United States. And so I don't think he's interested in racial purity or anything like that, but I think he is interested in sort of maintaining kind of white control of the United States. I think that's true. Um, so they are related to each other. Both of them are trying to ensure a future where white people have economic and political control. It's just that the white supremacists are kind of a more extreme version, and they're interested in maybe having a white country or sort of maintaining genetic purity or things like that. So the supremacists are kind of a more extreme version, and they're more interested in kind of the purity of the white race kind of thing. White nationalists are just interested in control, economic and political control. So can we say that white nationalists are more peaceful than white supremacists? You could probably say that. I think the more extreme people's views are, the more likely they are to use extreme methods to support them. So I think you could probably say that. Yeah. So I think that's probably fair to say, Benamir. Um, I think that's probably fair to say. Um, but then the thing is that if you include the alt right in that, yeah, you could distinguish white supremacism and white nationalism that way. So supremacists are more interested in sort of genetics and purity and having a purely white society or a purely white country. White nationalists are kind of just interested in making sure that white people still have control of the country, whatever it looks like. And then the alt right is a mix of kind of random angry people, right? Some of them are racist, some of them are misogynist, some of them are anti-LGBTQ, some of them are kind of religiously intolerant, some of them are anti-Semitic. There's just a whole collection of sort of angry, nasty people in that category. So they're a little harder to define for that reason. Okay, so further questions or comments or statements or things you want to say? Karen, let's say thumbs up. Okay. Thumbs up, Karen. You're welcome, Banamir. As always, my pleasure. Okay, so quiz on Monday. I'll post it in Microsoft Teams with the classes that are in the quiz. I'll post a list of who goes first and who goes second kind of thing. And then I'll see you Monday morning with your cameras on, and we'll do another quiz, okay? So if you have any questions over the weekend, of course, or for the rest of today, you can always reach me on Microsoft Teams. But until then, I'll let you go. I'll see some of you in comparative cultures in about 45 minutes, and then some of you I'll see I'll see you Monday morning, okay? So I hope everyone has a good weekend if I don't see you in a little bit. And yeah, see you Monday, okay? Bye.